Hey, 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 what's happening, y'all? Welcome back. We got another episode of The Strange Road. I'm your host, Mikey. As always, riding shotgun, Bub, the co-host. And we got Stoner and Disbrow in Master Control holding it down tonight. What's happening, fellas? There they are.
Full house.
Look at that. Hard at work. Dude, those guys are always crushing it.
I'm just always thinking about, again, we've started the countdown. Now the heat slowly rises as Kyle and Matt suffer through the show.
Yep. The heat's rising in Master
Labor
Control.
of love, that's
we got
right.
Time's ticking down. We better hop right into it. The oxygen runs out in that little room very quickly. Thank you to those guys.
Oh, man. They're the best.
We appreciate all you guys listening and watching out there. You guys can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at The Strange Road.
Yep.
Facebook group, Strange Road Hitchhikers. Drop some links in there. Get the conversations going. We appreciate everybody watching here on YouTube. Like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell anytime we go live. That really helps.
Yeah.
We keep all the premieres and the live streams. Yep. We keep all the premieres and live streams completely ad-free. Great way to support the show is those super stickers and super chats. We appreciate the heck out of all of our listeners, wherever you're listening, Spotify, Apple, Google, anywhere else. Please, if you like the show, 5-star rating or bust.
That's right.
Would be super helpful.
Yep.
Thank you to all of those that have been rating the show.
Yeah.
So
it helps.
Yeah, it really does.
It helps.
So.
We appreciate it. It's important.
Absolutely. But we have a giant show tonight.
Duh.
Pun intended, folks. And this is cool because before I introduce our guest, I'll just kind of lay the foundation. But Stoner and I have been following this gentleman on Instagram since 2020 when we started our podcast and started doing research on the. We did our Giants Detours episode, which is getting tons of hits. In the last 6 months or so,
people like giants.
That giant skeletons in the Smithsonian episode, I think it's the Strange Road Detours episode 3. If you guys haven't checked that episode out, and then also our interview with Jeffrey Wilson, that's in the TSR Pit Stops playlist on YouTube.
Both are pretty good.
That's giant skeletons in the Serpent Mound.
Yep.
So kind of shouting out some of the giant stuff we've covered. Heather Arnold we've had talking about Aruban giants. And so here we are again.
We're back for another
one of my favorite subjects.
For another take.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into it. Let's introduce our guest tonight. Help us welcome to the show, historian, researcher of the unknown and forgotten past, Travis Roy from Giants of Ancient America. What's happening, Travis? Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for doing this, man.
Yeah.
My pleasure, guys. Good to be here.
Heck yeah, dude. Heck yeah. Like I said, we've been following you since 2020. You have just endless amounts of newspaper clippings, articles. I mean, it literally never stops. This guy is prolific with not just giant documentation, but also out-of-place artifacts. You cover a lot of earthworks and kind of ancient temple complexes around America. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where we can find you, and then how you got into all this.
Okay. Well, first off, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and the name is Giants_of_Ancient America. And Ancient America is one word. So that's where you find me. If you're wanting to look into all these articles that I blast out there, that's kind of how I like to think of it. I like to just blast them out there. Because I feel like people aren't getting taught this stuff.
Yeah, it's not being covered enough, obviously.
Yeah. Blast it out there, put some epic music behind the story, and just kind of enjoy it.
Yes.
That's kind of how I roll. But I got started back. Well, really, my journey started around 2010, but I guess you could really go before that, because I've always enjoyed ancient history. I've always been fascinated with history just back in school. But fast forward to 2010, I was kind of on the trail of the ancient Celtic people. And I kind of traced them, I was looking into that, right? And that's when I started to discover the megalithic monuments, Western Europe. And they even kind of trail, they kind of trail all the way back to the biblical land. They really do. So in studying that, I was like looking into the burial mounds of Europe, and then just the historians reporting on it. They were finding giants among them. Even the Romans said, well, these Celtic people, some of their men were head and shoulders taller than the Roman men. I was like, well, what's going on here? And then the deeper I looked into it, I bought a couple books, and I was like, you know what? These books, they didn't always have pictures of the articles they referred to. They would have just type, like they would retype it so you can read it. But, because some of these they're hard to read because they're old newspapers. And so whenever I do my work, I have to edit it, like each one to where you can read it, because sometimes it's hard to read.
Right.
So I had this idea. It's like, why don't I just research and see if I can find if these are real articles? And so I did. And I just started an Instagram account back in 2013 and just started plugging them on there. It's changed a lot since then. In the beginning, I was afraid to put like the newspaper name because I was afraid of powers that be. I didn't want it easy for them to find where I was finding it, right? Let's go ahead and scrub that away. I'm not trying to get like conspiratorial or anything, but that's kind of how it started. And so I kind of wish I didn't do that, because people are like, where is that article? I was like, and then I had to go back and do more research and re-find it.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you can't find that one again. And so it's kind of tough. So sometimes I just have the year. But nowadays, I definitely try to plug the actual newspaper, even though it's not even a newspaper that exists anymore, but it's still cool.
Right.
So that's how I got where I'm at. Long story short.
Man, yeah, I mean, so where were some of the archives, or were you actually in physical archives, or were you in internet archives digging into like the Oil City Times archive or whatever it is?
No, I was just online. So there are a few websites, but the one I try to use the most is it's a Library of Congress website. So it's just free domain. It's called chroniclingamerica.gov. So, and it has newspapers. I can't remember. They say they start in the 1700s and go like till today, I think, maybe into the 1900s somewhere. But I've never found an article written in the 1700s as of yet that was about a giant. But that's where they go. So you have a really big database to look into. But the more I've been using it, it's hard. I used to be able to plug in like 3 or 4 words and pull up a lot. If you use 2 or 3 words, it pulls up 0. I was like, that's not accurate. I drop 1 word and it pull up a lot. So why is it not pulling up any? So it's getting harder and harder for me to research. But that's where I try to do most of it there. But I mean, and that's free. So like if I wanted to, I could get a subscription to like the New York Times. I know you can do that, and you can there's a ton of them in that too. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these are like, for example, let me find one. I think you just mentioned it, like Oil City Times. Like maybe it's still there, but a lot of these are, I know in my Metroplex area, the newspaper that I find articles written under, it's no longer that newspaper anymore. It's called something else. So maybe it was bought out and now it has a new and approved name, but just for reference to understand what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's great to know, because, some people, they don't know where to start if they want to start looking into this stuff. In 2013, when I started looking into it, I was just following Jim Vieira's Facebook page, where he before he wrote his book with Hugh Newman, he just had a Facebook page and was posting basically what you're doing on Instagram. And I found that group. And then he was having source links to everything. And I was just going right into these archives and going, I'll be damned, right there it is.
Right.
He's not like photoshopping something and putting it in old newspaper text, but like, here it is in a National Archived library. A lot of them was Library of Congress or Google Books. Tons of stuff. That's where all those old...
Hard to find now?
I mean, the antiquarian journals and all those things that the pre-archaeologists, those guys had journals. The Orient Journal, I can't remember what it's called, but
okay.
We covered a few of those, but you can find all those on Google Books
Okay.
for free,
So it's still out there. It's
Yeah.
just okay.
from what I can
Got to
tell.
dig for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
gotta-
sure.
So, Travis,
Yeah.
what's kind of your favorite thing that you've found? A couple of your kind of highlights. We do have a few Instagram links kind of bookmarked from your page that we can talk about, but maybe what's one that really kind of blew you away where you did a little bit more of a deep dive into beyond the newspaper article?
Yeah. Well, I can see this one here. I have it printed off here, and now I don't have. And I was like right before the show started, I was like trying to find like the article, and so I don't have the whole article in front of me. But I think y'all would like this one. It's 1880 from Ohio, the Daily Miner via the Cincinnati Enquirer, September the 14th. So basically, it's a report on some giants that were discovered in Ohio. But at the end of the massive burial mound that contained 12 prehistoric giants ranging from 8 to 10 feet tall was a megalithic stone sacrificial art altar 12 feet long and 4.5 feet deep or high. So, or no,
Wow.
that would be wide probably. Yeah. So it was 4.5 wide by 12 feet tall. I'd never heard of that before.
That's incredible. Every now and then you'll have these megalithic structures that are inside some of these, but it's more common in Indiana. In Ohio, you have some of these where I've read where you have these almost like big megalithic tombs where the giant's sitting upright. They found a copper gorget around his neck, but they're facing east, sitting upright. You see that common, but then those are kind of like the chiefs or the kings.
Yeah, it's not everybody.
And they're in these big megalithic tombs. In Indiana, there's the Mounds State Park in Indiana. That's where they dug up a huge megalithic.
Oh.
I mean, these slabs of stone were perfectly carved, and it's still sitting inside this mound to this day. It was recreated.
Wow.
But they found that
That's wild.
whatever was in there was highly, highly decorated. But in Ohio, it's a lot more rare. But I'm always fascinated because people think of mounds and earthworks like, oh, it's just a bunch of dirt and clay and sand piled up. No, there's structures inside of a lot.
Yeah, they can get pretty intense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's typically what is in there, or some sort of a megalithic complex, and that's really what I like a lot of, is to find that where, and I try to point that out whenever I'm making a post. It's like, hey, this is megalithic, because I think people don't even think of it. You know, like you're saying, they think it's just a pile of dirt. Well, there's something more going on, and this megalithic race of people, or similar group of people, you know, they traveled the world, or, you know, and they did the same stuff. Like they have megalithic tombs all over Israel, you know, from where the Canaanites were. They took their ways with them wherever they went.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's pretty cool to point that out.
Right, and it's not to say that like Native Americans or, you know, ancient people in Ohio weren't a part of that culture or were, you know, somehow not involved in the creation of these amazing earthworks.
Right.
But I think it's more like these two groups were living beside each other. You know, we can talk about one of the posts that you have from an explorer from the 1600s. One of your posts slipping my mind right now, but we can get to that. And Bub and I found the one with DeSoto going up in the Florida and Alabama and going up through the river systems and finding really small people and then giant people in the river systems of America and, you know, the 1500s. Well documented.
Wow.
Yeah. I just think people just don't want to admit that.
But they were
we
alive.
don't all look the same, and even today there might still be that going on.
And they were alive. These weren't giant skeletons.
Right.
DeSoto and them were reporting.
Well, we did the research on Magellan and his reports of giants, and they tried to take some back with them.
Yeah.
You know?
Patagonia.
Yeah. Yeah. They were trying to bring him back on the boat.
And he died.
Jeez.
The giant he died.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. But, you know, Captain John Smith did the same thing. He encountered some
Instagram
race of
post.
giants.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So he did too. He encountered that.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about it. But there were also I've discovered giant skeletons. Well, not me personally, but an article about giant skeletons in that same area. So they kind of, and even this article itself kind of pointed that out. It's like, hey, and there were giant skeletons discovered in this area. So no, you're right, for sure. Not too distant past, really. They were seeing them for real.
Yeah, and maybe a guy came up through the river system and just gave everybody smallpox too. And by the time everybody came back from the East Coast, they were all gone. Maybe that race was just killed off from, there is stories of wars, the red-haired giants versus the black-haired giants that the Cherokee talk about, where they were kind of caught in the middle of this giant war, and they raced. The black-haired giants were cannibals, and the red-haired giants chased them into this cave, and there was a lot happening. Hunted down the last race. They just kind of killed each other off in some areas.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that they lived alongside the Native Americans, and I also think that they could have interbred with them. Mm-hmm. I mean, I found a report where it seemed to be like you had this giant dude, and there were two women buried. One was like more Caucasian, one was like a mix of Native and Caucasian. So you had that going on back then. They're not teaching that today, but I do agree with you that the Native Americans were intermingling with these people at some point. Even I think the Cherokee have a story to where they had a certain leadership at one point, and it was a kind of a problem, and they could never do anything against this leadership. And so you have to wonder, like, who was this leadership? Like, were these some of these giants that were kind of being bullies over them? They had to band together and finally push them out because there wasn't a woman among them that they can just freely come in and take. So it was a problem. So I kind of think they might have lived among them too.
Right.
So
right.
Who's to say? Yeah.
Wow.
People get mad when you talk about that, though.
Mm-hmm. People get mad about everything.
They get very upset.
People get mad about anything.
When you talk
say there's
about
giants, everybody gets upset.
It's giants or it's aliens. It's like, well, that's racist because it's, not to say that. And no one's saying that the ancient people
We're just saying there
of
could
Ohio
have been giants too, alongside Native Americans.
Couldn't have built the earthworks or anything like that.
Right.
But it's just a mystery to me that you do find and maybe, in my opinion, if they've been there for thousands of years, they are Native Americans as well.
They could have been Native American giants.
And exactly.
100%.
Nobody knows.
100%.
Somebody was a giant. Some person or thing or skeletal remains of 7-8 foot, whatever they are. Somebody or thing was that thing.
And
somebody was the giant, whoever it was. Like somebody claim it, like the real Slim Shady. Let's go.
Yeah, and Dr. Bradley Lepper has written a lot of articles in the Columbus Dispatch.
Yeah,
he's used to be the Ohio OHC's director, but his stance is very mainstream when it comes to this stuff, and
for good
totally
reason.
Discounts the newspaper articles and the town hall reports. And basically this is a big media frenzy to get people to buy newspapers, or it's a hoax by this person that was really just like a Barnum and Bailey hustler, snake oil salesman.
But was that really driving newspaper sales that hard? Wouldn't you just stop buying the paper back in the day if they're like every week there was a giant? You'd be like, no, there's not. Like you would know.
There's no evidence because there's no bones. We've never actually found a giant skeleton.
Okay, hold on. Let me ask this question. Of the newspaper headlines.
But why don't the newspaper
How often were newspaper headline articles coming out, say, within if you could analyze this, how I like data, right? If we could take it and analyze this, like where were the articles being generated and what times, right? Like, so if it happened in Cleveland, Ohio was the next one, and Illinois the next day, or was it 2 years later, or because that's what I'm saying. If they're saying, oh, well, everybody was doing it, well, then it would have to be about a coordinated time or a time period
with no internet.
Everybody would be talking about this, or everybody would be writing about it in papers, or did they endlessly do? That's what I'm saying. So then nobody would have believed it because it would have been like a modern day National Enquirer version where people would go, I know this is a fake story. I'm not even buying it. So in my mind, there wouldn't be a demand for it.
But the New York Times
wrote about it. So there had to be some smoke to that fire.
And Travis uncovers not just newspaper articles, but where the Smithsonian themselves have written in their own writing, their field journals,
they've
and
confirmed it.
the field journal from Miamisburg, Ohio. My favorite story in Ohio is the Miamisburg Mound. They dug up, 7-8 footers, put it on display in the town hall. All these people came, lines and lines of people came to see this thing upright on display.
Right, like the Mutter Museum.
And all these newspapers wrote about it. And the Smithsonian showed up and was very, very, very interested in this.
Well, I bet
and
they
then
were.
they wrote about it in their field journals, and that's documented too. That's really, really hard to find. Now, I could not find that back. When I was looking into this in 2013, I found that field journal. Like he was saying, it's really, really hard to find some of that stuff. So it's documented in the newspaper. The Smithsonian had it documented in their field journal. Hundreds, maybe 1,000 people plus, the whole town saw these things on display in public. And then they take the bones and they're like, nope, you got to take all this down. You can't have this thing on display. Like it
Who
freaked
said
out.
this?
The Smithsonian came and grabbed everything
Why do
and
they
disappeared
get to do
with
that?
it.
But why do they get to do that?
Because they're the authority.
For what?
Exactly.
History?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's
I
what
guess for the narrative.
they push.
Based, that's so weird. That'd be like if you dig up something in your backyard and like it's this historical thing and somebody's like, no, God, that's not the history we want people to know. I'm sorry that I don't want to live
But that was
knowing that's
even-
what's happening with this history.
That was even
I want real
before
history.
John Wesley Powell, like this was a lot of giant skeletons happened before Powell and all those guys started going against and talking about giants and this other race of these huge people that had copper gorgets
Yeah.
and massive swords and these strange artifacts that just don't make sense.
Just how long have we been sweeping everything under the rug of human history? Like, why?
I mean, it's 1800s, early 1800s.
I'm saying we've been doing it a long
Or just
time.
when they've been writing about it.
Do you think that they actually had them on display at some point?
I
Of
think a
course,
lot
none
of
of us
these
were there.
towns did. I think they did.
I think they did.
Early on?
Oh, I know they did. But my curiosity is, were they on display in Washington, D.C.? That's my question. Like, I wonder.
Yeah, I don't know.
They-
if
I mean,
they
they
ever.
I don't know.
They say that they're going to in these articles, but like, did they do it? Like, or did they just say, "Hey, yeah, we're going to do this," and then they just take it out? I wonder how long were they trying to collect them, and what their plan was. I don't know.
Can I give
Just a
you a
thought.
weird? Can I give you a weird like anecdote analogy of like why I think like the skeletons probably were on display and what have you, and a lot of that actually really happened and
It was
gets
public.
memory hold.
At first.
Is because when we went out west and we've been to Sequoia, if you've ever been to Sequoia National Forest and seen the trees, what have you, when they first started logging those trees and sending them back east to like New York and different cities, they were like, these aren't real trees. You guys are screwing with us. There's no tree that's that big. It was such a remote, unique,
Right.
singular area where these trees were that no one else knew about them or had ever even seen them. And when they started logging, they're like, these are not real. Like, no, they are. So with the skeletons, even having them on display, they might have been up there for a minute and people saw them. And then again, it gets memory hold. It was just, it was the hot topic in the papers to talk about,
Yep.
I think it gets whitewashed pretty easy.
Yeah, I mean, I do think they did have. I mean, because I did find a report, and it was just an excerpt from an article about Peru. So this is 1900, about giant remains discovered in Peru. It says, but there are plenty of giant remains. Travelers in Peru tell of monster human skulls found in 30 miles from north of Lima. Of this race of giants, a tribe lived on the island of Puna in the Gulf. Their skulls and weapons are in the Smithsonian Institution. It just stated it.
What?
Yeah, so it's like you can see these, you can verify this, but
Right.
you go to the Smithsonian, and so maybe they did. Maybe they did because this article says so.
There was a time when
So-
they accepted it and they were actually really looking into finding the truth because they did. They showed up, they wrote about it in their field journals, they document it. Why, if they were hiding it, they wouldn't document it back then. Then John Wesley Powell, the whole narrative shifts. We're not talking about giants. We're not talking about this, manifest destiny. If these things are really important, we're not going to be able to move westward and just keep taking over land and spreading, this, their version of civilization. So with that, if it's very special and there is this lost civilization and it's like a Mayan type or Egyptian type, you can't just plow over that culture.
Yeah.
So is that what happened? Eventually the Smithsonian changed their tune, because right there you have it. They're not hiding it. It's documented. At that point, they're talking about having it at the Smithsonian.
There's so many excerpts and clips and references and quotes of the Smithsonian showed up and they took this, or the Smithsonian was sent this, or the Smithsonian they are overall that's why it's in the Indiana Jones movie. It's a joke.
Yeah.
It's a joke. That's why it's so crazy, because everybody knows it's a joke.
Yeah,
it really is. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
I mean, like when I do my research, I don't necessarily go out to try to find out what the Smithsonian did. But during my research, I have uncovered a few articles that they link together. And so I can just kind of go over them real fast.
Please do.
In short. Yeah. So in 1891, the Smithsonian, there's a whole article. I won't read it all, but basically they argue for the right to excavate and display prehistoric skeletons. So they were pulling some out of Ohio, and this guy kind of got in trouble from the Smithsonian. The locals were like, hey, you can't just do that. And he's like, no, well, okay, if we can't just do that, then like, what about the mummy from Egypt that we have in the museum in Washington? Like, why can't we? So they argue for the rights to do so. That is 1891. 1895. Yeah, in 1895, I found another very long article about a Bayless museum that was going out of business, and he had a 9-foot skeleton, or a mummified giant there. And they sent multiple people, different type of people from the Smithsonian, and they were going to purchase this to verify if it was true. A real mummy, and it was. They verified it was, and they said this is going to be a great thing to display at the museum. That was 1895. Fast forward to 1934. They say, I found another article in the Waterbury Democrat about the Smithsonian's fed up regarding the reports of prehistoric giants being unearthed. So they had a new somebody come to work for them. His name was Alice Herdlicka.
Mm-hmm.
And he was tired of it. And he's a real dude. A buddy of mine loves. He loved this buddy of mine. Like, I don't have time.
I remember the name very well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So he's tired of having to answer the phone per se.
There's too many reports.
Oh, hey, we found another. Yeah. People were saying, hey, we found one. Yeah. He couldn't control it because you had somebody out west, digging a basement, and they found one, or you had them, cutting in a road, and this grader unearthed a mound. They thought it was a hill. Say this mound was only 5 feet tall. They thought it was a hill, because some of these mounds aren't massive and monstrous. Some of them are small. I don't know if it's because of age, but you still found some big dudes in those short mounds.
Yeah. Well, maybe even just the geography around the mounds changed over time naturally. Maybe the ground or land shifted, and next thing you know, it doesn't look like much, but it still is,
Well, the bigger conical mounds aren't burial mounds. They're astronomical earthworks. So a lot of the smaller mounds
that's what I'm saying.
Are kind of the burials.
That's what I'm saying.
Outside of the perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones that get lost a little more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like they would have them near waterways too. Mm-hmm. So who knows, erosion over time. Like water was they were always near water and rivers and stuff. So that's probably part of it too. But that's a great point with the massive mounds. Like, a lot of them are temple worship mounds for their gods.
And then the intrusive burial mound culture was a later culture that would dig into those big mounds, and then we find them and like, oh, that's who built these. It's like, no, those were the folks that were just hanging out, probably passing through. It's like, maybe grandma passed away.
They just repurposed it.
Let's just throw her in this beautiful, ancient temple here.
Right by the water. She would have loved it.
Right. Great view. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the Florida of Ohio River valleys.
Yeah.
knows?
No, that's a great point, because that did happen a lot.
Yeah,
That happened all the time.
yeah.
But on your article, and you mentioned like the where the articles were, like were they just making these stories up just for readers? A lot of these articles that I find, they're not on the front page, and they, because you can tell when you see a front page, like whenever I'm looking at it. You don't get to see it because I have to crop out and just put so you can read it.
Yeah.
But whenever I'm doing my research, a lot of these are not on the front page, and they're not at the top of the page either. So just for people to know,
Like
they're not. If there was like some spin story that they were trying to grab readership and stuff, it wasn't that.
It's hard to imagine that they were inventing clickbait back then with giant stories. You know what I mean?
And some of them probably
Yeah, I know
were.
what you
Like
mean.
the Cardiff Giant, we know is horseshit. We looked into it.
Okay.
We dug into the Cardiff Giant was a complete hoax. They know for a fact that was
I know the name. I don't remember the whole story.
it's probably the most famous giant story
yeah.
in the country that made the New York Times rewrote it.
But just because
Every
one might
AP
be a
news-
spoof doesn't mean that all of them are. And that's what always
But that's
happens,
what
even though there could be one.
People point to that one.
Yeah,
That's
man. But
what sucks. People are like, the Cardiff Giant was complete garbage. Everybody was doing this. That guy, the Cardiff Giant had connections with Barnum. P.T. Barnum's partner
so what?
was
It's great.
involved in that weirdness somehow on the back end.
They're
These
weird
They should
people.
have made
They're doing
yeah.
sideshows.
Well, they're wanting to make some extra money on the side, or
Yeah.
with for their shows. So
Yeah.
they didn't have one where they could just create one.
Yeah. Maybe they couldn't go just dig up a giant skeleton and put it in the show. So they're like, we'll just make one.
right.
It's not a bad idea.
And Freemasons, a lot of these Freemason lodges in Ohio were all those guys were out there digging up mounds, looking for weird artifacts.
Gathering stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of old Masonic lodges in Ohio.
I'm just waiting for somebody to do a modern day dig, like you're saying now, of like they're going to put up a house or whatever, somewhere that it's enough, that there's enough coverage. And then next thing you know, there's that like, hey, we found a 10-footer. Like, what? Sorry, what? We're going to need to see that one.
Dude.
We are going to need to see that one. It's going to have to be televised.
Right. But do the Men in Black show up and,
It's
Well,
going to have to happen.
that's a good, what happens if you were to publicize that? Like, how long is it going to last? That's
and everybody's going to discount it as a fake or a hoax. If it ever reaches mainstream news, it's going to get kind of shifted, even if it is real. Hopefully they reach out to us if it's found in Ohio. That's what I want.
Oh, man.
Do a special episode at 3 in the morning
we
whenever
just
you
show
get that
up.
call.
Yeah.
Turn on the lights. Get the studio hot. Let's go.
Oh, man.
There's more there that are undiscovered.
Right.
Because like you're saying, they weren't all in these massive burial mounds.
Nope.
But those are the kings, the chieftains. And even I have a book, I don't have it in front of me, but Monuments of the Mississippi Valley, I think is what it's called. Cyrus and can't remember
Squire
his name,
Davis.
but they were from, that's right. Yeah, Squire and Davis from the Smithsonian. They went all across, and I was just trying to learn more about the different types of mounds. And they said there were different types of mounds. Like you had the ones for dead, you had ones that they weren't sure what they were, you had the ones that were for temples. But they did point out that not all of the people were in the mounds. Like some of them were just in regular flat burials. Like they've discovered like just what would you call it? A graveyard per se, without all the headstones.
Mm-hmm.
So how many are out there that are undiscovered? I mean, I feel like there's a lot that are still buried.
Right.
Good point.
I would agree. Our buddy Jeffrey Wilson, we've had on the show a couple times. He's doing an expanded edition of Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley. It's almost out. He's working on his bibliography and basically he added this whole catalog of these undiscovered maps that no one's ever seen.
He's got a lot of stuff.
That all these people throughout hundreds of years, 200 years now, we've thought that they were the ones that drew the maps that are in Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley, all the surveys. Turns out these more obscure cartographers are really the guys that created all these maps, never got credit. And it seems as if Squire and Davis have completely taken credit. And this is all kind of
Yeah.
really brand new stuff that isn't
Yeah.
officially out.
We're still waiting on the book to come out. Jeff is hard
Oh,
at
I
work,
can't
but
wait.
he always gets
You'll love
more
that, Travis.
documents, or
Yes.
he'll get another, cache of.
Oh, it never ends.
Information
He's
and-
like you, dude. It never stops.
Yeah, we're trying to
Yeah.
get him to hit the cut it and just make it,
He
and
can't stop.
whatever else
researching.
keeps coming
Publish
in.
it.
Yeah.
Volume 2. Make
We're-
a volume 2.
We're trying,
Yep.
but
That's
I
right.
think he has one of those, he's so thorough, and he wants
He's
it to
so
be
thorough.
so succinct and have it all together, and that I think
Yeah, I
he's
get it.
just he'll get there. It's real close.
Yeah.
it's
close.
real close. We're
I'm
waiting.
so glad. Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to see that. I'm glad you said that, because when I was reading through their book, I'm like, they're not really talking about skeletons here. They're hardly mentioning them.
They don't.
Why? Because I've found all these articles, but they don't touch on sizes or anything. They did touch on that, about the burials. They did touch on that intrusive burials. They talked about that too. I'm learning more about the forts and the walled forts and all these fortifications and
Yep.
whatnot from them. But I find that interesting that they might not be responsible for the actual maps. That's, to me, that's crazy.
Really
I would
brand new
say
information.
a bulk of them they're not
Most of
responsible
them,
for.
yeah, and they were if they did draw them, or the part of their crew, they were based off of somebody else's map.
Yeah.
Much older maps that date back to it was written in 1842, I think, is when it was Monuments was put out.
no
Two
idea.
guys from Chillicothe. It was the first book that was ever written or published by the Smithsonian or had anything to do with the Smithsonian. But there was a guy from Kentucky that they were basing a lot of their work off too. He had written a book in like 1820 that predated Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley, and he doesn't really talk about giants or giant skeletons except in a couple of his like journals, but none of that really made it in his book either. So it's weird that a lot of these early books, you just don't hear the accounts, but a lot of them are in town hall reports or newspaper articles or these antiquarian journals. But as far as those books, I haven't been able to find much either, Travis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's crazy. And you wonder why. That kind of makes you start to doubt about, the giant skeletons, like, in the back of your mind. But then you have to tell yourself, it's like, well, what about the massive battle axes that they've found, the massive weapons,
Right.
or even footprints in riverbeds,
Right.
around the earth? We see pictures of those, and you can't refute that. I mean, those aren't carvings,
About
and
that.
neither are these big stone battle axes. There's a, I need to just write it down so I can remember it, but it's a museum in Branson, Missouri. The guy who owns Bass Pro, built this museum. It's like Museum of Ancient Ozarks, Native American History or something. But down in the basement, you have hundreds and hundreds of battle axes just on display. And these things are huge. Some of them are like, 9 to 10 inches, and they're like 6 to 7 inches tall. And these are granite battle axes.
Wow.
And they even mention in there, like, just look at the size. Like, I was reading, and it's like, look at the size of these weapons, and some of them were just gardening tools, just huge. Just think of how strong these people were. I was like, yeah, I bet they were strong. And so when you come across these articles, and it mentions that the stone battle axes discovered with these 68 giants. You can actually go witness these. I think this guy has a lot of them that were written written about in these articles. He has them on display down in the basement, and you can go see it.
I have a question.
Wow.
I have a question about those.
Wisconsin's got a lot of
Because
earthworks.
when you say they're like giant axes, do you mean like they're oversized, or they're heavy?
Like this? We talking like
Heavy. So
Because yeah.
Go ahead.
And the only reason I say it is I saw this post, and it was this weird ancient form of training and strength training, and it was like this whole theory based off of this pole with like the weight on the other end, and like maneuvering, and like that whole. So what it is like this, it's almost like a Viking like strength training core at like to be able to use those weapons too, but to do those, you're moving those very slowly, and you're building up all those muscles so that when you're actually using like a sword or an actual axe, that thing's like flying through the air like butter. You're not wielding an axe that would actually take me effort, because I don't lug a 5-pound axe around even a lot. Like that's going to take. But if you are like, trying to use one of those as like a weapon or what have you or something, that's the only way I could see it, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. Like I'm not wielding a granite axe. Like it doesn't, like 40-pound axe isn't going to make much sense to me.
Right. No, I mean, that's a good point. I don't have the answer to that, but there were a lot of them there. And I know what you mean. Like they had axe heads that were small, right? And I was like, okay, I could wield that. Yeah. I could wield that one. But I can't touch that one. And why are there so many of them? Some people say, well, that's ceremonial. But you go back to the articles that mention, hey, there's 68 giants, 7 feet. And a lot of them were much taller than 7 feet. And also their stone battle axes are buried with them. So what were, you know what I mean? It's like that kind of connects the dots.
Okay.
In my mind.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's much more proof in the pudding on that end of saying, oh no, they were 7-footers and their axes are with them. Like, okay, then I'm with you, man. I mean, I believe that there were giants and that there are still, like I said, probably out there to be discovered yet, but that it just doesn't fit with what we want the narrative to be. And like I said, with Herdlicka coming through the Smithsonian, he really kind of put the brakes on it. But why? What if they're not here anymore, or what? Why the big mystery? Why the no? Everybody's like, 6'8" is tall enough, or 7 foot, that's tall enough. Like we don't need people to 8 foot or 9 foot or 10. I don't get it. Yeah, I don't understand it. Hidden? What does it break?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it goes against the Darwinistic theory. I mean, if you think about that, I don't know. Like
they were all kind of buddies behind the scenes. Darwin and a lot of these guys were kind of like eugenicists and in these weird little clubs together.
Oh,
and you kind of had this like new scientific elitism coming in, where the historian, the ethnologists, and the scientists kind of all were hanging out together. And, don't promote this because it's going against my theory. There's all these giants being found.
You're hurting my credit.
Yeah. That's one thing I've heard. Who knows if that's horseshit or not. But
I'll tell you what, stranger things have happened for someone's ego.
They're sitting back in a cigar room, puffing cigars, talking about,
Yeah, I believe it.
Unknown history.
Go there. I could buy that.
But I mean, just look at the old school books, or maybe they still have it like that some, but like you see the diagram of, the little monkey, and he's a little bit taller, little arch in the back. And he finally is standing at like 6 feet tall, maybe that's as big as you're going to get basically.
Right.
The odd time you may be 6'8", like you're saying, but that is a slap in the face of that theory. If you were to continue to talk about these guys that were like, here's a 10-foot guy, his teeth are the size of a horse's tooth. Let's try to explain this. Like people are gonna believe this hardly. So his teeth are like horse's teeth, if you can imagine that. And his skull is 1 inch to 1.5 inch thick.
Yeah,
that's wild.
And his shoulders are 4 feet wide, and he's 8 feet tall, or whatever. I'm skipping to another giant, but yeah, that's like if you're 8 foot tall, he's 4 foot wide at the shoulders. So that's not just like an NBA guy. I don't think I know of an NBA guy that's 4 feet wide. No. I mean, he may be 7'6", but he's not anywhere close to 4 feet wide. No. I don't even know if he's 3 foot wide.
No.
I mean, I may be wrong, but I don't know. Well, I don't think he's even 36 inches.
But put it into perspective. If, let's say, 2,000 years from now, people start digging up our graves, how many 7 foot tall people are you going to find? Not that many. Mm-hmm. Look how many 7 foot and up skeletons they were pulling out. I mean, these articles are just nonstop, constant.
There's some tall people nowadays. I mean,
there is, but I mean, it's not every day that you run into Shaq.
No,
is what I'm saying.
Yeah. You don't.
You don't. People are, for the most part, average height. I mean, we only have a handful of people that we know that are above 6'6".
Mm-hmm.
I know a fair number of people above 6'6".
Yeah, I mean, think about it too. Like if you were to open up a grave, say if the guy was 5'5", the skeleton might have spread out a little bit, too. That's something to keep in mind. So maybe he did appear to be 6 foot or 6'5". But what about the ones that are massive though? The bones are so thick. I don't know. That's just a thought I had. But to go the other way with that, our skeletons are a little shorter than what we are because of all our flesh. So, if I were to rot away, I'm not going to be 6'2".
Yeah. Exactly.
I am now, but like I have skin on my feet, I've got all the ligament, so I don't know, kind of a strange way to think, but it's true though.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject that I don't think is going away anytime soon. I mean, just the amount of people that are interested in just the volume of documentation that you found. And people can throw away, oh, well, these newspaper articles don't mean anything. We don't have the bone. I think the newspaper articles and the town hall reports are very important.
That's where you got to start.
Why is it poo-pooed? Why don't they? Why don't people give credit to this? It's documentation, as far as I'm concerned. Some of them are hoaxes, sure, but I mean, there's so many. How can you deny something is going on?
I just want to see the day that like there's a show that's like, the History Channel goes to the Smithsonian. Brought to you by somebody that, actually goes in there and just literally they just go through all of it.
It's probably all gone by now.
What do you do with all that? Just throw all those bones away?
Well, they're reburying a lot of them, repatriating them. But
yeah.
We have a couple of bookmarks on your Instagram page, Travis. If we can, Stoner, if we could start actually just bring up one of those links, we can start wherever. But anybody that wants to check out, here's Travis's Instagram page, Giants of Ancient America. Pretty sweet, man. You have a variety of and I love the way you edit your page too, so we can actually read the article. So kudos to you, because a lot of people have kind of copy and pasted sloppily where you can, find these clippings, but they're just really hard to read. They're low resolution. So this is great.
Not very.
Yeah, it takes some work.
Oh,
yeah, I can totally tell.
Yeah.
But this one here, I wanted to just mention Fort Hill, which is a really great site that's close to Serpent Mound. And what was your conclusion about looking into Fort Hill? Because there's so many interesting stories about this place, and they found evidence of smelting metal. So one of the rangers handed me slag from, they're not hiding it at all. Like somebody was up here making tools, metal tools. And that's part of the tour when you go there. And that's the same ranger that told me and my wife about the giants and the legend of the Nephilim down in the parking lot. And so these forts is what they call them. But, there's not a lot of evidence of people in ancient times warring with each other back then, from what it seems like. What do you think about these places like Fort Hill, Spruce Hill? They're different kind of earthworks.
Yeah. It was, to me, it was just, I wanted to just, instead of just always posting about giants, I was like, well, what were they doing? What was their daily life like? And so that's why I was like, well, I'm going to just kind of redo some of these stories that I'm finding in these books, or these. Now I'm finding out that it really wasn't Squire and Davis maybe making these maps, which I think is awesome. But, just like, what were they doing? Why were they having to make these forts? And it was like a fortification, if I understand it right. So they could see what is coming, what an enemy, if they had an enemy, see them approach. They had access points. And a lot of these, it said it was very steep. Like you couldn't hardly penetrate this. So I was thinking, like, if they were giants, they could just build a city. But it seemed like they were intelligent enough to look at the natural lay of the land. It's like, well, let's build this fort on top of this high spot. But yeah, I don't know why they were doing it. Other than the legends of them fighting each other, other races of giants, like you said, the red hair and the black hair giants. Not sure who their enemies were. and why would they would be afraid enough to have a fortification, unless it was just strategic planning for futuristic events that they didn't even foresee to be coming, but just like, just something intelligent to do.
Yeah.
For down the road.
Right, exactly. But the fact that they found evidence of smelting metal,
Yeah.
and then, you dig these things up. One of our big interests is the copper gorgets that they find, which is basically like a big Egyptian style breastplate. And these just really ornate pieces of jewelry that are just like out of this world,
Yeah. So I think that's one of the things we always dug up and found out when we did our episode on the giants was the reason the Smithsonian took the stance they did on the giants, on the Native Americans, on the way they kind of just pivoted the story in general was, we can't say they're intelligent because then we're coming over here and we're wrecking a societies. Like, we're not coming over here and saving them from being these helpless, warmongering tribes that, don't know how to. They've been here thousands of years, but we're going to finally bring, society to them.
Yeah, they thought
that's the way
savages.
They framed it, right? Yeah. So you can't come over here and wreck house if somebody's been living here for thousands of years and has a way of life. And so anytime they started finding these, especially anything like with the metalwork and stuff like that, they're like, no, that never happened. It got hidden really quickly, or things like that just didn't seem to really make a lot of waves, and they were very simple, and they were Native Americans, and sadly they all died from smallpox, and manifest destiny, hurrah.
Yep,
that's a great point. That's probably one reason that they stopped talking about all these stories, because you're right. Like, I found more than once giants having this copper covering, copper armor. Sometimes they had copper crowns, and so that's like, if you were to keep showing those in the Smithsonian, like, you couldn't justify your taking over of all the land.
No.
Yeah. Makes total sense.
Copper crowns.
And it makes even more sense that when we arrived here as the settlers or what have you, that we were being helped out by the natives on how to get food and how to procure crops and all kinds of information they were giving us, right? Like, sadly. But it's really funny because and then you think, like, all the movies and the portrayals, like typical, like, say a Western or something from maybe the 40s, 50s, whatever, like didn't portray Native Americans as very
doesn't age
intellectually savvy, or that they knew like the cosmos and the passing of the stars overhead and whatever,
but they knew a lot.
But we had to dumb them down. We had to make them look very primitive.
Like they needed help or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
they
were
our religion.
Yeah. Like,
they needed Jesus.
Or more that they were almost like animalistic as opposed to like developed modern humans living in society with clothes and streets and cars. And not at that time, but
they didn't need it,
society, they were more tribalistic and that, whatever.
Probably healthier, happier.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would say.
Well, tribalistic is another way of law and order. They had law and order within their tribal systems.
Yes, they did.
It just didn't look like England's version of it.
Right.
Exactly.
Which England's version of it wasn't necessarily the best. I feel like just you had some good settlers coming away. They were trying to run away from this, stuff in the West in England, but you always have the bad guy that comes to the top and starts controlling things. So like, let's push all these natives out. Let's take them out of our land. We found gold here, so we need to need to extract them from their land so we can extract the gold. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. That's evil. That's just pure evil.
Yeah.
So you always have these guys running. Yeah, and somehow they always have the money behind them to make it happen. Mm-hmm. So it's crazy.
It does 100%. Seem like the same old song and dance, doesn't it?
It does, all over and over again.
So sad, but hey, maybe one of these days it'll stop and the music will change, and we'll the Smithsonian will start advertising all the giant skeletons they have, and they'll have
Could you imagine
doors open wide to the public? Come on in and check them out. Like, we'll have this whole kumbaya moment globally, and everybody will say, let's just get on board with the fact that all of history has been obfuscated to all of us. Because that's what I'm saying. Like, to me, that's the whole Wizard of Oz moment that I think really needs to happen, is the fact that, like, we're all kind of like we think we have a good beat on what's going on, but we're still trying to figure it out ourselves because we clearly don't trust or believe the actual stories we're told a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that? Because again, when there's smoke, there's fire usually. Like there's a good reason for these cliches. They mean something. They carry weight with them.
Yeah.
And Travis, before the show, we were chatting with you a little bit about some of the connections that people brought up with Sasquatch and the giant skeletons and some of the crossover there of Sasquatch we think of as this kind of wild man of the forest, but were they in ancient times maybe wearing copper gorgets and more civilized and decided to just bolt into and break away from, are the giants Sasquatch? Are Sasquatch the giants? Are we looking at this? I personally think it's separate, but there are instances where they absolutely could be.
It's really
not a black
tough.
and white issue.
Yeah.
Well, I can share with you an article. I don't have it in front of me, but I can share with you an article I came across, and it was talking about, I was searching for giants, right? And the name of the article was called, or the title was called A Gigantic Figure. Okay, so this story was in the Ozark Mountains in Missouri and somewhere in the 1800s. And these guys were out hunting, and it was kind of a snowy day. And they thought they were tracking a bear because it has some weird, really long, gigantic footprints in the snow, but it seemed to have like claw marks. They looked like claws to them. So they tracked it for miles and miles. Eventually they heard a noise from a ridge above them, and they looked up, and there was this gigantic figure. And the way the article described it, I'll never forget it. It said this giant, and it's like it was a wild man. They call it, back then they called them wild men. Mm-hmm. But it's a gigantic figure. He was holding a massive, like an 8-foot long club. And he had a loincloth on, it said, and he had some rude moccasins with like thongs, like, whatever they would use to tie them to get the moccasins together. Mm-hmm. That's what the claw marks were. They're like, this isn't a bear. And it was dislodging a boulder, and it was sending this boulder down towards them because it was tracking it. They were tracking this thing. But to me, what was crazy, it sounded like they just described a Sasquatch because it was covered in hair. Yeah. But yet it had some sort of minimal clothing on. Like it had a loincloth and some sort of, and you could say, we could say whatever. Like, I didn't write the article. I don't know what to make of it, but it was there. And so like, this is nuts.
Man, so that lights me up because we saw the renderings from DA and Robbie. That's what I say. Where they've had accounts of these Sasquatch looking kind of Native American looking, that they're more human looking. Yeah. And then some of these things are just like straight up just above a chimpanzee or a gorilla. Where they're more animalistic. The Billy apes, yeah. Right. But
the Congo apes, the movie The Congo, you remember that film? The apes that guard the lost city of Zinj, the like kind of rough looking guys and gals, or their faces are all scarred up. Those are Billy apes, and those are a real type of ape. Like they didn't think they existed, and they are just these horrifyingly. If you ever Google it, man, give yourself a nice little nightmare nugget.
Yeah, I'll write that down.
But yeah, like I said, we were talking about earlier, there's this whole kind of like spectrum of, apes. And so when we talk about Sasquatch, and when DA mentioned it to us and had those renderings, we're like, it really changed my perspective on that. And to some of these effects too, of like, well, you've got giants in these mounds, and it's really hard to, it's hard now because again, nobody kept good records. And apparently the Smithsonian just bulldozed everything over, set it on fire. Who knows?
Damn it, Jay from Cryptids of the Corn.
Yeah, Jay did it all. Our buddy. We joke he's a Smithsonian plant.
You've talked to the Cryptids of the Corn guys before, haven't you?
I don't know if I have yet.
Okay, I wasn't sure if they've had you on the show, or I know they're definitely aware of your work. I know they're followers of your Instagram page.
Good guys.
But what was it?
I've had. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, so I've had people say, like, well, how do we know that these aren't Sasquatch in these mounds? Yeah. Just because they're so big. I was like, well, like to your point, like this has armor, it has copper armor, or it has jewelry, or it has some sort of weapon. Not saying that Sasquatch can't have a weapon, but that was always my answer.
Yeah.
But then I found that article and I was like, well, I don't know what to make of that. Like,
Sure.
that's when I had that thought. Maybe they just don't have time to create armor and weapons like that and clothing, because they're more on the run than they are having time to create things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That was just a thought that came across my mind one day. So,
I mean, it makes total sense. They're running for the deepest part of the woods. They don't have time they got to live as basic as possible.
Never seen one. I would like to. At a safe distance.
Yeah.
Well, that might happen soon.
I hope so. At a safe distance.
Yeah.
Travis, you said you were a hiker. You ever come across anything interesting when it comes to a Sasquatch sounds or wood knocks or footprints or anything when you've been out there?
I've actually had a lot of things like that. My first encounter, as I would call it, is an encounter was in Virginia in 2014. I was with a buddy, and I was already doing giant stuff for a year at that point, like just on my Instagram page. But we were hiking in the mountains in Virginia, and we were going up a logging trail, and long story short, it started to veer in a direction that he didn't want to go in. And I'm not from Virginia, so I was just hiking with him. And so he just stepped off the logging trail towards the right. And we walked a little distance, and something growled at us, like super deep guttural growl. I mean, like the deepest man's voice you can think of, multiplied times 20. I can't replicate it at all if I wanted to. But it was probably 30 feet in front of us. We couldn't see it because it was like some laurel. It was August, so there's a lot of green. So there's just real thick forestry, right, or bushes right there. So something was laying in that. And it growled because it didn't want us to keep walking towards it, because it would have been a little bit of a weird situation, right, if we just started walking right in it.
Yeah.
And then so it let out a warning growl, and we knew exactly that it was a warning growl. Like we could read that. So we stopped. We froze. We didn't move anywhere. We just stayed there. I don't know why we did that. We just froze. And then it growled again, and I could feel it saying, like, get out of here. What are you still doing here? That's what it was a different pitch to the growl. Like, what are you doing here still? And so at that point, we started to leave. So he started walking. Instead of walking to the trail like we just had come up, he walked straight down the mountain through the thickest stuff, like that thing was hiding in. And I was like, dude, wait up for me, man. And I had this cool rock that I was going to take because it was like quartz. Thought it was pretty sweet. I got rid of that real quick, and I was trying to get him to slow down, but he hardly slowed down for me. So that was my first encounter there. I looked it up, black bears don't growl. Like, I was like, okay, I might be onto something here. I went back there the next few years, and I would go back in there alone. That's when I heard my first wood knocks, like banging on trees with just me out there.
Whoa.
Yeah. I had my machete though, so I was fairly safe.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. So black bears can't growl?
Okay, so if you look it up, they make more huff sounds. They don't make a growl sound like I heard.
Okay.
So that's
okay.
They make sounds, but if you look it up, it's not like what I heard.
Right, not a sustained like rumbling, like. But they might be like, oh, or like give you like a chortle or something. But they're not going to like
right
keep it rolling.
Right.
Like a grizzly might roar, but not a black bear.
Not a black bear. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, yeah. So I was trying to eliminate, well, what are the options here?
Sure.
Like, what does a black bear sound like? Well, it wasn't that. But since then, I took a metal detector out there. I was looking for we had permission to be on this property. It was a friend of his, and I was looking for like artifacts from Civil War or Revolutionary War, and I was beeping along. Well, and I was, digging around, but I heard a big boulder crash from up on top of that mountain, and nobody lives up there. And that's the same mountain I was hiking on and got growled at. And so I got curious. And so my curiosity always overrides fear for me. So I just was like, well, I'm going back up there. And that's when I started hearing the wood knocks after I sat there for like 30 minutes, just quietly with my back against a tree. So Virginia, I have had a lot of encounters like that, like no sighting, no visual, but there's something in the woods there that bangs on trees, drops boulders, growls. So something's going on out in the woods.
Dang.
Isn't that where Jessica's from?
I think so.
Virginia, the
I think
cryptid
so.
huntress.
Don't hold me to that.
I'm pretty sure she's from Virginia. Sorry, Jessica, if you're not. But I know we've heard stories about Virginia being super squatchy.
Yes.
I mean, those mountains of Virginia, like
I've driven through there a bunch of times.
Shenandoah State Park and
Blue
it's
Ridge.
just absolutely beautiful.
Blue Ridge Parkway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where it was, right in there.
Really? I've been hiking out there,
That's a
camping out
gorgeous
there.
area.
Yeah.
Lots of thick,
Not a bunch,
thick
but
forests.
spent a little time.
And you know,
Yeah.
it's mountains, like legit
Oh, yeah,
mountains.
yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
you can hide.
Yes. It's squatchy as all get out at certain points.
Yeah.
My wife and I went on a hike there one day, and it was the grossest hike ever. Everything was dead and gray, and it just stunk. And we hiked. The coolest part was we did hike this like ridge line, and you could like see once we got out of that, and you came out of this kind of like depth of a valley, right? And then across the way, like miles, 20, 25 miles off, you could see. But like somebody must have like a cannon out there, and they were like firing those off like, oh yeah, you want to talk about
cannon.
saw some massive estates like where the person's front yard was 5 acres to get to the road. Like, you know, the house is just setting back. Like they just had these huge swaths. Like it was so cool, but like big farmland out there. Very, very pretty. But
yeah, I love it out there.
Oh yeah. But yeah, it's
so that
squatchy.
was squatchy for sure. And Texas is squatchy too, because I was back in Texas. Well, I'm from Texas. So there was, let's see, when was this? This was like, it might have even been the same year, later that year in December or the next year. Can't remember. I had to go look. But I was driving down a country road. Like we have a lot of country roads out here in Texas. And I was driving at night on a country road. And these roads, they don't have any stripes down them. So it's wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass each other. And it was like 7 o'clock at night in December. So by that time, it's been dark for a couple of hours. And I remember I was driving down this road, and I was looking at headlights, oncoming headlights, because I have a bad habit of looking for drunk drivers. Like I tend to stare at their headlights because I want to see if they're swerving or not.
Yeah.
So something ran in between me and his headlights at a rate of speed. It took 1 second to cross this road.
Ooh.
And he had a back angle of like a 15-degree angle. And I didn't see arms, but it was a humanoid figure. And his head was slightly below the tree line. So that would be, I went back and measured. Of course, when I wrote it down, I was like, I had to be like 7 foot tall. That was just because that's what my mind would allow me to write. Mm-hmm. But I got to think, it's like, well, where were those trees? Well, I went back and measured. They were closer to like around 11. What made me think that? I was following down that road, a semi truck one time during the day. It's like, wait, how's he going down this road? I need to measure this tree line. Well, it was way up there. So his head was below the tree line. So it had to put him around between 10 feet to 11 feet.
Wow.
And
so this was at night.
A hop across the road, basically. You know,
this thing was moving so fast.
Yeah,
it scared me. It was moving so fast.
It reminds me of some, and we're not. I mean, we've seen the footage. It was off air. You know, Dia and Robbie showed us that military helicopter footage from Oklahoma, I believe it was, or Texas.
I have no idea any
but
of
this
the
thing's
details.
Running through this basically like riverbed area. And then they're tracking it through the trees at one point, and you know you've got all the military, the overlays of all the different, like you know you have your kind of heat sensor, you have your all their different overlays, I guess, for the video, and then you could see it was blurred on purpose because when you get like those UAP videos, whatever it is, they blur those videos before they release them or give them to people. And it was slightly blurred. You could tell the instrumentation was legit, and they're tracking this thing. And at one point, it looks up at them like this, and then keeps going. And then this thing, just like you said, across this riverbed, and they had to say what that riverbed was 20 feet wide, 25 foot, this little creek bed. And it really just took one hop over this thing and it cleared this creek. Just
wow.
Boom.
Yeah, it's not moving at speeds that you and I are moving at. Like, not at all.
It was wild.
It reminds
Very
me of like
compelling.
watching the Incredible Hulk movies, the first ones where like he's out in the desert and he's running. He just starts taking like bigger and bigger leaps to where he's just like jumping like a couple miles in each step now, just like ridiculous lengths. But, if you're an 8-9 foot tall, 400, 500 pound, just muscle bound primate, of lore and legend, you probably have some unique physical abilities.
And they're trying to get a go to release that footage to the public.
I would love to see that.
It hasn't been released
pretty
yet
incredible.
to the public, but it's the most compelling
I remember watching it being like
Sasquatch video I've ever seen, because you can
fake,
tell
it's really good fake.
You have
not fake. It's
all of the
amazing
instrumentation of the readouts of whatever device that they were flying or recording on. That was the most interesting part of it to me, was all the things that you could see besides just the video that was around it, the instrumentation.
They had all the technology that you could look at and see the different readings or whatnot.
Exactly. And it was all blurred out, but still you could see this thing pretty damn clear. Could you imagine seeing the super high res version of something like that? I mean, they've got to have tons of footage of.
Somebody's got it. I know they do.
I want to know where these things are hiding, because whenever I saw that thing, I was like, wait, because where I saw it, it was like there's a big forest over here, and then there's another large forest where it was heading, but there was like some fields in between, and so it was booking. I figured it out. I got on Google Earth and I did a lot of looking around. It's like, okay, where was it going? But there's a lot of evidence that was a pathway, because I went back and you could see there was like a field T-post, or like a metal field post, and it had something had bent it two directions where you could only see it that bend if you were looking straight on coming from a field across the road. So it was almost like a marker. You wouldn't see that if you were driving down the road, but if you were looking at it from a field across this road, you could see that marker. So, and I don't know, it ran across the road in like 1 second flat. The direction it came from, there was like a 6 foot tall pipe fence. And so I was like, it took me forever to figure out why didn't I see it landing and then running? Like well, it must have been tall enough. It makes sense now that he just kind of stepped over it when he ran.
Yep.
Just booked across the road like that.
What?
Yeah. Well, just think about it. If you were that tall, around 10 foot, how long are your legs?
Yeah.
Like, I have to picture like what? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. So I didn't see its arms. So it kept its arms beside itself, right? So it had its arms, and all I saw was his body, his head, and his legs moving. But he was running straight, kind of almost like he was trying to hide as much of his body as possible. That's the feeling I got. It's like, that makes sense.
That's incredible.
It's so strange. Yeah, that's what I thought. So
Sasquatch, hey, hide and seek champion, still undefeated. He's just trying to keep his title up.
Do you think, you mentioned wanting to know where these things go? What do you think about? Are you interested in the connection with other phenomenon that happens around Sasquatch sightings? Some people claim that there's UAPs and UFOs that pop up, or orbs. Right. There's other phenomenon, dogmen, portals.
Yeah. There's a lot that comes along with Sasquatch.
What's
any interest in some of those kind of little bit further out there theories?
Yeah, sure. Because I've thought of it a lot. It's like, how are they staying hidden? Because I do some research in the area where I saw this thing cross the road at night. I have access to an area close by, and I've been out there at night. I stay safe. But
I was about to say, you're bold, man.
Dude,
out there.
He's more curious than fearful, he said.
I know.
Kudos.
No, but I've seen the orb lights. And so there was one time I had found a trail, like a trackway, and you could tell. I don't know, maybe I'm giving out too much information, but like you can see I can see their trackways. Like you just kind of see it. it looks like an elephant has walked through this part of the underbrush. It's like briars are here, nothing's walking through here, but something crawls through here. And so I'd found one of those trackways, and I was up at night. It's about 1:30 at night, and I was waiting. I was just waiting for this thing to pass because I knew it was a full moon. I'm just waiting for this thing to pass. Like I know this is where it goes. I wanted to see something crawling because I've heard that they crawl. Now I've not witnessed it, but I've heard that. So I'm like, well, it's going to have to be crawling through here like an army crawl. Dude. So about around 1 to 1:30, I see this orb. I've never seen this in my life at this point. And it's like, and it had a pattern. It's like flash, 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 flash. It's like a pattern of two, a brief pause, and then 3 flashes. It did that. It moved one direction, and then it disappears over here, but it immediately starts from where it started the first time and does that same pattern and goes the other way. And then a little bit later, maybe a minute later, it did the same flash, 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 but it stayed put. Now, it was a full moon and there was no body down there. I could see that, but there was some forest here, some forest over there. Now, after that orb light, I heard a strange owl sound in the woods. And then I heard a branch break over this direction. So I'm like, is somebody giving me away? That's my thought. Like, this light gave me away. And then I heard something respond to the light. So almost like the light was like, hey, there's somebody over here waiting for you.
What?
So I don't know if the light was,
some kind of it was alert system. Dude, who was it we were talking about the owl sounds with?
What?
Somebody was telling us about if you're out there, sometimes the owls are not owls and they're Squatch.
Yeah, 100%.
Sasquatch. No, it might have been DA in them. Maybe
I don't remember.
Somebody said that Sasquatch
wild,
can imitate
dude.
owls.
That's not the first time we've heard about that.
I've heard that they're very good mimics.
Freaked me out.
They're very good mimics.
So you're saying the light out there was like detecting you, even though you're just like in a blind or whatever. You're hanging out like waiting.
Yeah. It was kind of ratting me out. It was telling on me. It was telling them that I was there, but also it kept me from seeing them. Right. So like maybe I didn't need to see it crawling. Maybe that would have messed me up.
Like the spider, like the spider Bigfoot.
You didn't.
Joel talks
so
about.
after all that, then you heard this owl. You didn't see anything then, though.
No, I haven't seen the body. I didn't see the body at this point. I didn't see the Squatch at this point, other than the one I saw run across the road a few months before that.
Yeah.
So that's what got me looking in. It's like, wait a second, there's Squatch around here. Because this DFW area, there are so many riverways and forests. Like if you look at DFW Metroplex, you're looking at it, you're like, what? It looks like a bunch of woods and stuff. Because there's a whole lot of woods pockets and stuff, around the Metroplex. So I was outskirts of town, but where this all happened. So, but yeah, that's why after that I was like, well, I guess I'll just leave because I just got told on. I'm not going to see anything. But I saw the lights.
They're working for the Squatch, the lights, or whatever.
These lights. These lights will change colors depending on the time of the year. Like this time of year, it was like lightning bug season. I'll just call it that. So, but this light was the size of like an orange. So it wasn't a lightning bug, and lightning bugs aren't like that. The lightning bugs stay out just for a little while, and then by that time of night, they're asleep. Yeah. They're not flickering anymore. I've seen these same orbs. Like, dude, I was out a couple nights ago and I saw one, but it was like blue. Like I was hearing some bug. I'll just call it a bug, but it's like, that didn't sound like a bug. And so I started making noises with my mouth, and I looked away, and then I caught a blue orb out of the side of my eye. I was like, and it was like 30 feet from me. And I was like, dang it. And then the bug stopped making the noise for a while. It's like, what's going on here? So I see them and they change colors too. Like I've seen deep green. I've seen them where they're kind of floating through the woods, like almost leaving a trail.
Oh,
so they're not
God.
They're not bugs. They're not bugs.
God, bro. I've told you this story, and I think I've talked about it on the show, but the time our buddy, I think Roa was there for sure, our buddy Chris, but we had a cabin outside of Serpent Mound. We went to Serpent Mound for this event, stayed at this cabin, and then had this fire, hung out. And at one point, it just, the air got a little creepy, man. And it was just a weird vibe. And I remember getting kind of freaked out. And then all of a sudden we look up and this light goes through the tree like this. And we always kind of wrote it off. But, and you know, I think Roa said, well, dude, that's a car. It's got to be a car. And our other buddy was like, there's no road right there.
There's not a road up there.
There's no road.
It's just trees.
What do you mean? You know how high that was up there? The road's over here, bud. And I'm like, dude, that's the road or something. They're like, he's like, no, I'm telling you.
I could see how
that
you
ball
could think
was
that
big
at
too.
night, though.
And it was this bluish purple. This is freaking me out.
Yeah.
So later that night, we
What
go
time of
outside. So that would have been, I think it was the spring equinox.
Okay.
It would have been September.
Get
it was
the color
rainy.
of the light and okay.
It was rainy that day. We went to Serpent Mound. We walked around with these Maori elders, some indigenous folks that were drumming and playing flute. And we kind of, it was one of Tom and Terry's events that's where I met Jeffrey Wilson the first time too.
Oh,
and I met Ross Hamilton that day with Roa. And we were just participating. You know, we're like stragglers in the back. We're not really part of any group or anything. We're there just to connect with what's happening. And all of a sudden, it just started pouring down, raining at Serpent Mountain. It was very, very clear. You know, the weather out there is just so weird.
Yeah, pretty sporadic.
And then we're running to the car. We get in the car, and then we start heading to this. So that whole day was just strange, very, very weird. Met some very interesting people. And, you know, our buddy was complaining about his right eye just completely swelled up out of nowhere. His eye was just completely inflamed. He was in so much pain. We're trying to go to a store to get him eye drops. And then all of a sudden we start this fire, and then all of a sudden the eye thing totally goes away. And then that's where we see this light. And then later that night, we walk out to this big field. And over here is Serpent Mound over top of the trees. And it's glowing blue. The only thing I can describe is like the whole area over there, right where the mound was just had this kind of glow around it. And so we come out of the moonlight into this darker part of the woods, and we look down, and it's all these glow-in-the-dark little specks all through and it looked like somebody cracked open a glow stick and sprayed glow stick juice all over the ground over the entire area. So we meet this Bigfoot researcher years later, and she talks about these neutrinos that they find around Sasquatch encounters, where it's these little glow-in-the-dark things in the grass and on the tree. It's like this bioluminescent phenomenon that they've tracked and encountered with Sasquatch. Never really thought about these neutrinos. I just thought it was some, bioluminescent kind of worm or something that was in the grass at that time. But I've lived in Ohio my whole life. I've never seen these little glow stick spatter. You've been to the Luminous Lagoon, and
I've seen them in Costa Rica. I've seen bugs like that in the ground in Costa Rica,
but never in
the
Ohio.
jungles and stuff. I don't know. I've just never looked.
So,
I've seen them in the sand. I've seen them.
When you talk about those orbs, it always makes me think that night and meeting that Bigfoot researcher and how that kind of all tied together. And I remember maybe just being paranoid, but hearing stuff out in the woods that made me feel uneasy. Like, you're kind of being.
I mean, light in general just doesn't make any sense. Yeah,
it's just
not a car.
It goes through
not
the
an
trees.
airplane. It's not a helicopter.
Yeah, who knows what it was?
I've been fronted by them, like pushed. Like when I say push, like don't come any farther. Like I was on a phone one time chatting with a buddy, but I was out there, and I was like, I started walking towards the woods more from this area, and that thing came up towards me. It's like, it does a light, and then it's gone, and then here it is, and it's not like a lightning bug. It's like it was fast. I've seen them going over the tree canopy. I've seen 2 or 3 at one time. So I was always thinking, well, maybe it's just one, but like
there's multiple.
It's weird.
Yeah,
it's multiple.
Wow.
The creepiest one I saw was like a deep green, and it was moving really slow, close to the ground. I was like, man, that's creepy. And it was like the size of like maybe an apple. It was just good. But you know what? The weird thing, I've never heard this or experienced it before. Do you know what the sound of like if you have a stick welder and you start welding, that sound?
Yeah,
I want to say an electrical sound. It's like a
yep.
something getting electrocuted.
Like clicking.
This thing made it. Yes, it made an electrocution sound as it was moving along. It's like ooh,
like pulsing almost.
Weird.
Yeah, it's like it was like a zapping sound. Like something was getting zapped. Like it was that. I think it was intimidation. To be honest, I think it was trying to intimidate me. Like,
yeah,
quit being so curious. Like, you know what I mean? But it's hard.
Don't
it's hard
get
for
burned.
me.
Whoever you are.
Maybe Sasquatch is actually the caretaker of us.
Make sure we don't get too deep into.
Maybe
into
he's the park ranger of humanity. And
I don't know, man. It's just like
maybe he's coming around and keeping things in line, just making sure everybody's, but ultimately he doesn't want to be seen, he just wants to pull the right levers at the right times. And I don't know. I mean,
but here's the thing. It always goes back to
variations.
Ancient civilizations, lost knowledge, the giants, Bigfoot, UAPs, anything that we've been into,
it ties back together.
People that we talk to and have had on the show, which our show is kind of a baby still, but just the volume of these similarities and the old cliche synchronicities of of even talking to Travis, it's like boom, this connects.
Well, and that's the cool part too.
It's all just
there's so many things that line up for you. It might hit on something for you. It could hit for me, but there are so many points where, like, if you've had a unique experience, it's really hard to validate or verify that unless you have somebody else that
I've always written that off until today.
Right. It didn't make sense. It didn't have
It was a car headlight.
Had nothing else to base it off of or verify against, right? So now you're like, what the heck? Like, maybe, okay, that gets the wheels turning. That might be like, maybe we need to go back out there.
And I would never claim that what I saw was this or that. It's just we all saw it. We all saw it. And we all saw the weird little glow-in-the-dark neutrinos.
I want to see that.
And we all saw, it's a fantastic spot. Hit me up if you guys, it's a rentable cabin.
Yeah, we're going to, let's go rent that.
It's on the Mound View Farms is the property, but it's this really amazing organic farm. But they have this weird little cabin you can rent on their property that's nestled in this cool woods. But
sounds perfect.
1.7 miles from Serpent Mountain, so it's up on top of the crater. So the crater hill, that property sits on top of one of the outside upheaval.
Oh, cool!
Of the crater.
Oh,
so it's called Serpent Mountain View Farms, and so you can, you're kind of up looking down over that valley.
Very cool.
Really unique property.
Like we should go stay there for a weekend.
Yeah. Get
some research in. Do some strange road research.
Yeah.
See the light.
Well,
maybe.
I've never, I've seen some strange things, but I've never seen anything like that. I've definitely, not to my full awareness, had any kind of Sasquatch encounter.
Yeah.
Anything like that. But
never saw a Squatch for sure.
No, not that I'm aware of.
But I don't know, Travis. Sounds like you've been since you've gone down this path, it feels like you're kind of maybe a magnet for some things right now.
It really feels like it. Yeah. Like I didn't go out searching for it. It's almost like it found me.
Mm-hmm.
But funny. My curiosity probably lends to attracting more too. It's like, wait, okay, I saw that. Let me hang out some more.
You're putting out a signal yourself.
Here's the deal. I feel like I am, like when I go hiking, I go hiking and I go as somebody who knows that they're there. And I think they know that I know about them. And so that's why I hear things like even around Texas, hitting a riverbed. Like I've heard things. I've heard them. So like you said, the owl call. So like there was one time, 2020, they closed down the state parks, and I didn't really hit state parks that often because I like to hike by myself. I don't like to go hit a trail that some park ranger created for me to walk on. And so I'll hit riverbeds, and that's like Corps engineer or property or state-owned property. Fewer people are out. But 2020, I hit this riverbed. Well, because state parks were closed, there were a ton of people at this river. And I hit the river, I think it was summertime, so I could walk further down river than normal. But I remember hearing this owl call out, and it was like 3 in the afternoon. Lots of people, kids swimming, fish guys down there fishing. I'm just walking along with my hiking stick and my machete, and I'm just walking. And I'm walking kind of fast. Like I'm gonna get past all the people. I'm gonna go as far as I can. Well, I guess I was being watched because there was an owl way off in this thicket of woods along the river down there, and it called out. And I'd heard stories of the owls before, and I'd already experienced the story I told you about the orb and the owl. And I was like, that's strange. I mean, 3 in the afternoon, I'm hearing an owl, a barred owl, call out. That's a common river owl around here. But I just kept walking. I passed the farthest fisherman, and I kept walking. The riverbed is kind of dry. It has some water in it, enough to fish, but like there's a lot of banks. So I was just walking through the gravel, and something smashed like right beside me, 70 feet away at that bank. And I heard it like it had so much force that it's hard to explain. I was very scared. Like I had an extreme fear with the amount of force that this sound made.
Wow.
And I looked over and I could see part of a log still in motion. Whatever smashed a log against something. And I just stopped. And I looked back, and the old man fishing was way back there. Like, he had to have heard that. He had to have heard that. I was like, but because he's way back there, I'm not going to run away. I'm going to stay here. So I got out my phone and started videoing the spot. It's like, hey, something is right there. And it just smashed a log to scare me. I mean, it was a loud enough smash. If it hit me, I probably wouldn't be alive.
Right.
That's how much fear I had. I was like, okay, I'm gonna continue to walk downstream a little further. Like I'm gonna push the limit a little bit. You know, it's like I acknowledge you're here. Right. I respect you, but you can't disrespect me. You know. Yeah. And so I went ahead and walked. I walked as far as I could to where the river kind of got wider and I couldn't walk anymore without entering forest, and I wasn't about to do that. And so then I walked back. But as soon as I get back to the bridge to go back to my truck, I heard that owl call out again from that same location, like, hey, he's leaving, you know? What? So like there's
They're
something that owl, well, I don't know. I think it was the Squatch making an owl.
Yeah, it's just the Squatch, yeah.
I forgot to tell you that. That's where I was right where that owl had called out. When I got that smash happened. Damn. So yeah, that's how I was able to link it to the two together.
And people don't realize how a big tree crash like that, when you're in a woods and it's silent, that is incredibly loud. I mean,
it's a definite wake up call. It'll get your attention.
If you've ever been outside or walking down a sidewalk and a car crash has happened near you, it's an unbelievably loud sound. We were partying in BG years and years ago, walking down the street, going to get something to eat. And this car crash happened right in front of us on the road. And dude, it scared the ever living shit out of me. Yeah. Just the sound of the crash when two big, giant, heavy things collide. It's unimaginably loud.
Yeah, you're designed to know that and react to that.
Yeah.
Well, you know it's bigger than you.
Yeah.
Something smaller dropping next to you, like if you drop that book on the ground, you'd be like, okay, I hear the smack of it. That's great. But you drop something real heavy, like, you know, a bowling ball or something next to you on the ground, you're like, well, I don't want to drop that on my foot. Like, you know instinctually. So when you hear something egregiously big, such as a boulder or a tree getting smashed in half or whatever, a car getting, you know, those noises are very, like, same with thunder.
You said it scared the hell out of you, Travis.
Yeah,
thunder.
Yeah, you kind of feel it in your body. And so like, oh, okay, wait a second. Maybe I shouldn't be researching. Well, that day I wasn't even going out for that. Like I was just going on a hike. But I was like, maybe I shouldn't be into all. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't want to end up being dead. But you know, I didn't think it had any ill will against me. It was just trying to make a point. Like there was too many people out there anyway for its territory. So I didn't see it, but it had. I know an owl didn't do that, but that's where the owl, quote unquote, was residing whenever I started heading that direction.
Yeah.
So,
damn, that's weird. That's so strange. Funny. I'd never heard about owls and Bigfoot until we started this podcast up.
Same.
It's really, really
learning
interesting
a lot
that this is a common occurrence. You know, this is
There's a lot to learn.
being
I didn't know that
verified.
they did the spider crawl.
That was
I've heard that before.
weird.
And and you bringing it up, yeah,
Creepy
we've heard
spider
it before
crawl.
from other guests and podcasts and what have you. And it's like,
They
I'm
get
sorry,
down
what did they
flat.
do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it was running alongside me, like on all fours. What? Who?
Yeah.
Who?
Joel.
Joel.
Remember Necro put it in the post image? Necro found this. Someone did a rendering of the spider Sasquatch, and
I
somehow
thought Jesus said that too, though.
no, it was during Joel's episode. He put it in Joel's episode. Jesus did talk about a Sasquatch
I thought Jesus
crawling
talked
as well.
about it too.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
he said somebody was talking about running like to the house, and like it was like a juvenile, like, but it was like next to
That's-
them on all fours, like
Yep.
trailing, like just sinking with them, watching them, just like toying with them. That's what I'm saying. Like that would freak me
creepy.
out, man.
That's creepy.
That would freak me out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I want to have a close facial encounter with anything like that. I would rather see the orbs
Yeah.
and be warned by them.
Yep.
Hey, I'll mess with those all day. As long as they leave me alone, like don't hurt me.
Yeah.
I would rather that than see the spider crawl stuff, like close in close proximity.
Right.
Well, Travis, just to bring it full circle, is there any other Giants account or recording or article that you found recently that's just kind of burning you up or you want to share with the audience? Because, we could go on, article after article, but if there's any kind of one that really sticks out to you.
Well, I will say this, just a thought on the Giants, and it's a thought that I have a lot, and it's kind of what drives me, is I feel like these are people. And a lot of times they had regular-sized people living among them, but these are people that I feel like their story should be told. I don't feel like it should be suppressed. And like they're not in our history books, and they're not in school books. You don't learn them at university, about them at the universities. So I feel like that's one reason I do what I do, is I feel like, hey, here's a group of people that were unearthed. And it said they had a strange hieroglyphic language, but we're not taught about this. But this was found in America. They had some copper ornaments. They had this or what, some jewelry or shell bead necklaces or a copper crown. I just feel like that is the story, right? Like that's as much as we know. So
Right.
I feel like by just bringing it out, that's kind of what drives me, is to be able to put this stuff out there. Like it really is what drives me. But there are weird stories like the ones that supposedly had some horns growing on them, or double rows of teeth, or, elongated skulls, like no foreheads, just, sloping straight back. That to me tells me that they are a different type of human, if you want to call them human, or Nephilim. It just kind of verifies the Nephilim traits. So it's stories like that really get to me and keep me going.
Yeah, the double rows of teeth, that's like kind of an East Coast story that you have. I know you had an article from Maryland that I saw on your Instagram page not too long ago. That was the double rows of teeth, which that's kind of Jim Vieira found him being a New Englander. He was really into that. Not so much in Ohio,
Yes.
Indiana, but more like the area where you find the stone chambers is the six toes, 6 fingers, double rows of teeth. It's just a really, really bizarre genetic makeup of what they've, and some of them don't have anything, which is strange too, right? Or they're different types of giants. Some of them, yeah, there's just a lot going on there. There's so many different descriptions, and to discount
Definitely,
them,
definitely different tribes and types of them. I've definitely seen that for sure, which is fascinating too. Like I feel like Florida had different types, maybe a little bit smaller, but the ones in Ohio were pretty big. A lot, guys that were 10 feet, a lot, 9 feet. But they were spread out everywhere, man. So, but yeah, I would say that's what, I don't have like maybe one. It's just kind of like things I've gleaned from it. Like you pointed out earlier in the show, like they seemed to be facing east, or their feet were facing east, or their heads were facing east. They were worshiping something towards the east, or maybe they were worshiping the sun. Maybe they were worshiping the celestial bodies. Let's I kind of lean towards that, because a lot of their complexes kind of line up with solstices or equinox, or the cardinal lines like north, south, east, west. So
Right. Yeah. They seem to be mathematically inclined, knew their geometry, knew their astronomy, knew art, jewelry. I mean, we're talking about an advanced culture that seemed to have had some kind of a writing system, which, not people don't like to talk about that. The Bat Creek stones, and I know you had a post recently about one of the really famous stones that you dug into, which is the drawing a blank right now.
Yeah. I mean, I know I've uncovered or looked into things like that. Like, I know the Susquehanna tribe of giants that Captain John Smith witnessed. I was looking at an old book I have called America BC by Barry Fell.
Yeah.
And I was just flipping through it the other day, and it had a drawing of a stone, like the outline of the language. And he said, people had said it's just like plow marks, but you could tell it's not plow marks. Yeah. And he said once they looked into it, it was Iberian, which is from the Iberian Peninsula.
Right.
And John Smith said they had the strangest language he had ever heard. So, yeah, but you're right. People don't want to talk about that. Like, who were these people? I think they were all kinds of people, really, based off the different languages discovered. So, and I honestly think they kind of mingled in with the natives that were here alongside them. So
you had posted the Grave Creek stones, Stoner, just dug that up and found that link. But
yes,
Grave Creek stone, again, one of these things that's told to be a fake. The Bat Creek stone, the Newer Coley stones. This is another, very, very interesting. What have you found out about the Grave Creek stone in your research?
Honestly, I try to just put that. It's kind of like whenever I put out the one on like this altar or that fort, I don't dig into it. That's not like my specialty.
Sure.
But so I know about as much about it as what I posted right there. Like, I don't go in depth on that stuff, but I really should. I really should, though, because I've got a lot of information in hand about that stuff. And you know what? It is fascinating to me because I've been studying like just like touching back on the Celts. Like, the Celts were here too. The Celtic Ogham, which is like just straight lines. Like, it's been discovered in Oklahoma.
Yep.
Colorado. There are other places too. So like, I've been looking into that for years. And one time on my property here, I found some sandstones that had etchings in it that looked very similar in style to that Celtic writing. It's like, well, who knows? Like, I sent it to not Barry Fell, because I don't think he was around, but some of his friends and researchers. I sent it to them years ago. This is like around 2010. Whenever I was sending them stuff, I even sent some stuff to Scott Walter way back in the day.
Yeah, nice.
I was into a lot of this stuff, but just kind of dabbling into it, right? Not in depth. So, but yeah, no, it's all fascinating to me, and that's why I want to try to bring out some language on these people. Like, who were they? Like, we're finding their skeletons, but who were they?
Yeah.
Like, nobody talks about it. There's got to be a connection. Like, obviously, Barry Fell's not connecting. He's not even talking about giants, but he's finding languages that were discovered in their areas and their land. So like, don't they connect? Like, they've got to connect somewhere with that.
100%.
So
100%.
I'll try to do more of that.
No, what you're doing is great, man. I love just the imagery, just showing the documents, because, and that's a great image of the Grave Creek stone. That was found in West Virginia, and basically the second largest conical mound in the United States after Monk's Mound in Missouri. Right. And, that was basically a riverbed that had flooded out, and 150,000 artifacts flooded out into this essentially this washout place where they had dug all of these artifacts up from this one spot. They built a museum, and the Grave Creek Stone was the most mind-blowing thing that came out of that, but some unbelievable stuff that no one talks about.
Of course.
And those artifacts are probably in the basement. They're not all on display, but not just the Grave Creek Stone. That's the one that kind of got out of the bag. But there were, I think, dozens of strange artifacts that came out of that honeypot.
I'm sure.
But again, it's a fake, not real. It's not any kind of language. It's whoever found it was a hoaxer, P.T. Barnum type snake oil salesman.
Yep.
The guy's been completely discredited, even though he's probably been dead for, who knows how long. But nobody looks into it. Once it's deemed a fake, nobody digs deeper.
That's the whole thing about it.
And it's just
because then you're told you're a kook if you do.
Mm-hmm.
Why? It's already fake,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's to discredit, I think. And all you need is one instance of it to happen, or one really good. That's what it's always tough to get behind things then too, because you got to be like, man, do I really put effort and weight behind this? Because it turns out then you're like the person like, well, you believed in it again. It's like one of these times it has to turn out to be correct. It just does.
Yeah.
Even with the UFO, UAP stuff going on now, there's a lot of trepidation with that of like,
what's
like,
really going on? Why are they just now telling us about all this? Something weird's happening.
Yeah. What else are they doing?
Right.
And what's a real UAP or what's not? Or UFO or what is?
Right.
What's not?
Right.
So it's hard to trust them, right?
Yep.
Do they really have the craft? Are they really trying to force these contractors to give up their exotic material? Is this all a big dog and pony show to flex their muscles?
Crazy.
Because Congress has been way behind on this stuff, and now they're kind of going, hey, how come we're not invited to the party? We're going to have all these hearings and have all these whistleblowers come up here. It just seems
they're late.
Very, very strange.
Yeah.
And, it does tie into, we got to know our history before we can know where we're heading. So understanding the giants and the potential cover up here in the United States, why are we the only place in the world where our history is lost?
Yeah.
China knows their history. Egypt knows their history. The Mayans know their history. The Aztecs. It goes on and on. Mm-hmm. The Ohio mound builders and these folks, nobody really knows that much. Mm-mm. It's not a big deal to anybody in the world. It's not rushing to come here. Maybe they will now if Serpent Mound becomes UN World Heritage Site. But, we're not really known in America for having this wildly fantastic ancient civilization. And I think that's a shame and it needs a change.
For sure. Yeah, there were walled cities here. And I never knew that growing up. Didn't know that. It was just a bunch of prairie lands and that was about it. That's how we were taught.
Yep. Riding on horseback, killing buffalo, and sitting around the campfire and having their teepees, and that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
Just hunting and gathering and hanging out.
It was that. Yeah, it was that and so much more, though. Like,
well, that's what I'm saying. They gave the basic of the basic gist. Like, thousands of years they were here.
Yeah.
Thousands of years.
In those timelines of Mexico that Will was talking about where is it 250,000 years now? There's radiocarbon dating 150,000.
Oh, sure.
Homo sapiens sapien, not supposed to be in Mexico, not supposed to be in South America.
Right.
So all these timelines as far as us in the Americas is being pushed back. Yeah. We don't know jack squat.
Well, that's why I say I don't trust much of it. Again, even the universe, like, it's only 13 billion years. No, it's 26 billion years, guys. We got it wrong. Like,
now the universe.
You let me know when you got it figured out. Then come back to me when you actually figured it out. And quit give me a bullshit answer because that's what it is. Even in science, sometimes, even in trusted science,
all the time,
it is still very much like we thought it was 13 billion years. It's 20. Maybe it's not even 26. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe just don't even try to put an estimate then. Like, give us a rough idea, but don't try to say definitively, absolutely, this is how long it is, or this is why something is, or this is why you're wrong and it's not Sasquatch, or it couldn't be this, or there's just so much dismissive nature towards it because it's like, well, it's not the science. It's like your science is kind of BS sometimes too, man.
That's right.
Like, I'm sorry, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not a weak thing to say if you don't to admit you don't know something. Like
100%.
I think they think that they have to throw something at it. It's like, well, what's wrong with saying you don't know yet, or you don't understand,
Right.
or you don't know?
I find it much more admirable when someone can tell you that they're wrong or that they don't know. And that was one of the things that was always kind of like a key development tool that I wanted to have, was the ability to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind being wrong. I'm going to be wrong. I've been wrong. It's going to happen again.
New information.
Everybody is wrong at some point in their life, guaranteed.
And
it happens.
New information comes along. Hey, if you got to change the textbooks, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You can't hold on because this professor's been teaching the same thing from his professor to his professor for 100 years.
Well, and it's ideological dogma.
You're telling me that we haven't learned anything new in 100 years about what is going on in ancient Ohio?
Right.
You're telling me that we're still teaching the same exact
It's the Truman
bogus shit.
It's the Truman Show. It's that knowledge filtration. Like,
and not all of it.
Explore.
Some of it's,
nope, it's already been discovered, Mike. There's
frustrating.
nothing else to discover.
I get angry.
It's all been discovered.
Well, before I blow a top, we should wrap this up. So I just get mad towards the end of these kind of episodes. I'm having a great time, but I always get upset.
Well, I think because
pissed.
we want answers. We want answers. We're tired of the runaround, and we're tired of being put on hold and getting, the receptionist at the front desk going, it's going to take an act of Congress to go downstairs and see the Newark Holy Stone. Like,
that lady told me that.
No. Oh my. Well, here's something too. Like, I don't think there's a chance that somebody who's put all of their career in life, say it's a professor, into a certain narrative, that they wouldn't think twice about destroying some good evidence, some real evidence, some real truth.
Oh, sure.
I think they would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Yes.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I think so as well.
So,
I would agree as well. Easily.
Yeah. It's sad. It's sad. But
I think
it would happen.
The new young generation, like Emily Aldrich from the Portsmouth, Ohio Museum, from the Portsmouth Museum that we met and shot one of her talks last year about the Portsmouth earthworks. People like her gives me a lot of hope.
Good.
When you talk to Emily, she just wants to find out about the truth. She doesn't laugh at you when you ask questions about what we're asking. She'll talk to you about giants.
Yeah.
She'll talk to you about things that she's looked into and has tried to debunk or to find verification for. She's not going to write up an article in the Columbus Dispatch calling all these people morons that go to Serpent Mound and ask the archaeologists about giants and giant skeletons. The reason why earthworks get visited is because of all these stories about giants and ancient aliens has covered Serpent Mound and earthworks in Ohio. It's
definitely brought a new light to them.
It's shined a big light, and that's not a bad thing. Embrace it, man. Emily embraces it. She's not saying verification, there were giants, but she's also not going to make you feel bad about asking that question.
Yeah,
I love it.
Browbeat you.
But those people I think are coming up. The next generation is more open-minded, which is what we need.
Yeah.
And they're enthusiastic.
Yeah. And very enthusiastic.
Enthusiastic.
That's awesome. I love it.
And we can get you in contact with her and Jeffrey or any of the Ohio researchers that you wanna talk about, man, because I think we're good at connecting the dots to other researchers and adding a little bit of piece of the puzzle for you. And then, of course, you have information you can share with all of these guys as well. And it just kind of keeps growing and building. So we like to, build those bridges a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great network.
Absolutely. Dude, it's been great chatting with you, Travis. If we can kind of put a bow on this baby and once again, just some quick final words and let us know where we can find you. And we'll button this baby up and like I said, we'll outro the show and then we'll come back and chat with you.
All right. Yeah, so if you want to find any of these articles that we've been visiting about, you can find them on my Instagram page or Facebook. It's the same name. It's giants_of_ancient America. And you can find me in both of those places and have fun reading.
Absolutely. And it's worth checking out. I mean, Travis has done his homework. He's got the receipts. And man, we love what you're doing. Keep doing it. The guy's relentless. He's obsessed.
That's what you need to be, though.
Yeah.
That's what you need to be.
True.
You do.
Yeah.
You have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Travis, this has been great. We're
Appreciate
going to say
you, man.
goodbye. Dude, thank you
Thank
so
you very,
very
very
much for coming on the show. You're the best.
I loved it, guys. It was great.
Awesome, man.
Till
Take
next
care.
time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds great.
We'll be right back. Dude,
Giants win again.
another great conversation. Totally in our wheelhouse. I get excited and fired up about these conversations.
I try to keep myself.
And I
more
always
balanced
wonder, I'm
about
like,
it.
am I still going to be into talking about Giants? Because I've been, 2013 is really when I just poured everything I had into learning as much as I could. Maybe burnt myself out a little bit.
Right.
But, I kind of take a break and I'm like, am I still passionate? And I get fired up about this stuff.
You're still passionate about Giants.
we bring this stuff up, it always gets my heart racing.
You know why you're not passionate about Giants 24/7 is because if you thought about it 24/7, you'd need like a blood pressure medication.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Because you'd just be pissed off.
I know.
Because you'd be like, "This is bullshit."
Well,
we should know about Giants
you
and the
run into so many-
Smithsonian.
yeah, you
And
run
it's
into
true.
a lot of
It's
brick
true.
walls.
It's
and
true.
It started getting frustrating because, my questions weren't being taken seriously. A lot of people had made fun of me. It's like, well, I'm finding these newspaper articles and these town hall reports. Like, it's pretty interesting. You should look into it.
Right.
Oh, whatever, man. That's ridiculous.
Right.
Until you meet somebody like Jeffrey Wilson, Ross Hamlin. Oh, there's people really, really researching this. Hugh Newman seems like a serious guy.
Yeah.
Jim Vieira, Travis
there are
Roy.
a
Travis,
lot of
serious guy here.
people that study these topics seriously.
Yeah.
Because there's something to them.
Yeah, 100%.
Nobody would look into this if there wasn't. Again,
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to kick him in the face too hard here, but mermaids, nobody really goes out and searches for mermaids that hard anymore because maybe there's mermaids, maybe
the
not, but
Discovery Channel
whatever, you know what I
show
mean?
about mermaids kind of ruined it.
I mean,
for everybody, they made a fake.
There's not been
documentary.
that many credible.
No,
Maybe it's just because it's hard. It's a water,
but
Sasquatch
there's
is
a lot of
terrestrial.
documentation about giants.
There is a ton of documentation about giants.
Not so much mermaids.
Not so much.
Mermaids, you're not going to get the receipts. I don't know what to say.
Well, hold on. Maybe there's a whole society of mer people under there, and Atlantis is under the. I don't want to go that far with it. It's too much. It's too much.
Another
Too
30
much.
minutes about mermaids.
And believe me, I got so much. I can get so much latitude within my own mind of how I can think about things. Yes, I can entertain a lot of thoughts,
Well,
but that's a tough one.
dude, this has been a great show. We're going to wrap
Killing
this
it,
baby
yeah.
up. Again, guys, follow us at The Strange Road on Instagram, TikTok, and
Check it
Twitter.
out.
Facebook groups rocking. Please share, like, subscribe. If you do enjoy the show, rate the show. Really, really does help us out. Super stickers, super chats are available on YouTube. We've got some big things cooking, and we can't wait to share everything that's been happening with you guys, and just keep an eye out. But
Keeping the ball moving.
yep, we've got some great episodes coming up. And as always, thank you to Disbrow and Stoner in Master Control.
The best.
show
There
that
they are. Hard
overhead.
at work always.
That beauty Master Control
yeah.
shot. That's awesome. Well, thank you guys, everybody out there. Much love. Peace, love, chicken grease. We are out.
Peace.
Bye-bye, y'all.